Wolvekraal Farm in 1993 was the kind of place where the land felt older than the people who lived on it. Everything carried a certain heaviness: the long gravel road, the rusted windmill turning slow and tired, the cracked cement dam that never seemed to fill. It wasn't a big farm, but it had a personality. And that personality kept secrets. We had cattle, chickens, a few sheep, and 3 horses. To most people that wasn't much, but to us, those horses were practically family, especially Bess, our chestnut mare. And then there was Simon, who loved Bess more than any of us ever did. Back then I was 16, carrying more stubbornness than sense. I worked the fields with my father, fetched wood and washed troughs, but the farmhands lived a life of their own in the compound. One made of stories, superstitions, rituals, and a kind of intuition white farmers rarely understood. I'd grown up hearing their tales around evening fires. Some made me laugh, some made me uneasy, but I always sensed that for them, these weren't stories. They were warnings, they were rules. And sometimes the rules weren't enough. Simon wasn't young, but he wasn't frail either. He had that wiry strength of men who have worked with their hands their whole lives. His skin was sun-hardened and cracked like an old saddle, and his eyes had a quiet intelligence in them, the kind that came from watching the world with measured caution. Before he worked on our farm, he'd spent nearly 20 years on a cattle ranch near Freiburg. The owner died, the family sold the land, and the workers were scattered like seeds in the wind. Simon arrived at Wolvekraal with just a canvas bag, a worn Bible, and a carved bone pendant he always tucked under his shirt. He didn't drink. He didn't swear. He didn't shout. But he believed deeply in the unseen. And Bess was his pride. Bess wasn't the biggest or strongest horse we had, but she had presence. She walked with a deliberate, elegant step, lifting her feet just slightly higher than necessary, as if her hooves never quite belonged to the dust below. A glossy chestnut coat, a long black tail that dragged when she was tired, soft brown eyes that made it impossible to stay angry with her. She wasn't skittish, but she was sensitive, the kind of horse that could tell the weather before the clouds formed or sense danger before the cattle did. Simon brushed her every morning. Not quickly, lovingly. He whispered to her in Setswana, soft little stories as he checked her hooves, cleaned her stall, combed her mane. When my father wasn't around, Simon would let me feed her carrots or apples. He'd place my hand on her side so I could feel her breathing and say, "Horses are honest, boy. They tell the truth long before people do." I didn't understand then what he meant. Later I would. The trouble began with the medicine woman. People in town spoke of her in lowered voices. She lived past the ridge in a shack hidden by thorn bushes and tall blue gums. Some said she healed the sick, others said she cursed the living. Everyone, no matter how brave, avoided passing her valley after sunset. One afternoon Simon returned from the grazing fields looking tense. He said her goat had wandered onto our land and been killed, flattened by a cattle wagon while the herd was being moved. It was an accident. But accidents don't matter to those who deal in curses. They argued. She pointed at him. Her eyes rolled back. She spat something into the dirt and said, "Your fear will swallow you. Before the moon is small again, something will come for you." Simon didn't sleep that night, or the next, and by the 4th night he spoke only in whispers. My father dismissed the story as nonsense, but the compound changed immediately. Men prayed aloud, women lit candles, the children hid behind their mothers' skirts. When a witch points at someone, something is set into motion. Something that doesn't stop. On the morning Bess died, nothing felt normal. The sunrise was muted, the birds were quiet, and the air smelled faintly metallic, like a storm that wasn't coming. Simon moved slower than usual, rubbing his temples like he had a headache that wouldn't leave. He brushed Bess, checked her water, fed her, and led her into the paddock. She nuzzled his shoulder affectionately. I remember thinking she looked sad. Her ears were slightly back. Her tail swayed low. Just before midday, her scream tore across the farm. Horses don't scream. Not like that. We ran out to the paddock. Bess staggered, foam bubbling at her lips, her skin twitching as if something moved underneath it. Her eyes rolled white. She reared once, a desperate, violent throw of her front legs, and collapsed. Dead. Just like that. No snake bite. No poisoning. No explanation. The workers refused to approach. The shadow took her, a woman said, clutching her baby tight. My father swore and grabbed a shovel. Simon stood at the fence, shaking like a child. He didn't cry, but his shoulders hunched inward as if something had broken inside him. He didn't help bury her. He couldn't. The farm was quiet that evening, too quiet. The sun dipped behind the kopjes, and a fog drifted in unnaturally early, rolling over the fields like cold breath. Around 10 o'clock, the dogs began barking, not at intruders, but at something unseen. Their hackles stood up, their tails tucked. Then came the knock. Violent. Desperate. Pete stood at the door, breathless, eyes wide. Boss, the horse is walking again. My father grabbed the torch and the rifle, muttering curses, completely convinced he'd find the workers messing around. But he wasn't prepared for what we actually saw. The fog clung to the ground like it was trying to hide something. The torch light cut through it, a pale cone in a thick gray world. Then Bess appeared, or what was left of her. Her coat hung loose, almost sagging off her frame. Her eyes were wrong, not glistening with life, but reflective like polished stones. Her legs bent unnaturally, moving with a stiff, dragging rhythm. There was no breath from her nostrils, and her mouth hung open far too wide. Then she turned her head toward us with a sound like dry bones cracking, and spoke. Not a neigh, not a human imitation. A voice from a deep, hollow place. Simon. We froze. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, but my legs refused. Pete dropped to his knees, praying fast and shaking. The mare began to walk, if you could call it that, toward the compound, hooves scraping like stones across cement. Dragging something heavy. Something inside her. And with every step, Simon, Simon, doors slammed. Children cried. Someone threw salt into the doorway. But the mare didn't care. She stopped in front of Simon's hut. The fog thickened. The world went silent. And then, the screaming stopped and Bess was nowhere to be found. At dawn, Simon sat upright on his bed. Dead. His eyes were wide, pupils blown, body frozen in a position of total terror. His hands clutched the blanket like he'd tried to pull it over his head. No marks, no blood, no wounds. Just fear. The Sangoma who came later refused to enter his hut. She burned Impefo outside and shook her head slowly. The curse is complete, she said. She called a Sejanaga a Skinwalker. It wears the dead like clothing. It has eaten his fear. My father argued. The Sangoma ignored him. The workers fled the area near the maize field. And Bess's grave. Empty, not dug up, not disturbed. Just empty. As if nothing had ever been there. Life on Wolvekraal moved on, but something broke that winter. The nights felt colder. The shadows felt heavier. My father drank more, spoke less, and never walked the fields after dark again. My mother prayed with quiet urgency every night, glancing toward the window as if expecting something to stare back. I never slept peacefully again in that house. Whenever the wind rustled through the maze, I heard something else layered beneath it. A scraping sound, like a hoof dragging over dry earth. And once, when I was older, visiting the farm after my dad had passed away, I heard it again as I stood alone outside the house. Scrape, 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 and through the fog, faint and trembling. Simon. I went inside, locked the door, closed every curtain, because whatever walked that farm, it was Bess, and it wasn't finished.